Hello, my name is Keith Jenkin uh, of the Lyme Regis Community Land Trust. Our first meeting was in 2012, Olympic year, but uh, affordable housing in Lyme Regis had been a factor for almost 20 years before then. It started originally in the 1990s when an exercise planning for real was carried out by Lyme Forward, a local group. This involves innumerable people running around, putting innumerable flags in places on a large map of the town where they thought affordable housing might be able to take place. One thing it did do, it spawned the Lyme Forward Housing Group, which did quite valuable work in archiving and researching, but finally ground to a halt because it had no means of getting to the next step and making use of the data that it had accumulated. This went on for some years, and really a catalyst was needed. And it came in the shape of Oliver Letwin, MP for the locality of the day. He suggested the forming of a community land trust. And his suggestion seeped its way down through the strata of local government and finally came to rest in the hands of that most august of bodies, the Lyme Regis Town Council. They, in accordance with their highest traditions, passed it back to Lyme Forward, who had started the process some 15 years before. Well, they, by this time, had traditions of their own, and they called for volunteers. And four of us, who presumably had misunderstood the question, found ourselves sat around wondering what a CLT was and what it did. In fact, we didn't choose a CLT. I think the CLT probably chose us. And I'm the only one of the four who remain. The other three thought better and left town. Now, our initial decision to form a community land trust had been made for us, and our pathway was made plainer by a local councillor. We went to a council meeting very early on, basically to tell them that we had decided to open a CLT, and Barbara Austin stood up and said, "What you want to do is to build affordable rental houses for local people in perpetuity." Poor dear, I don't think she realized quite what a mouthful she'd said, but we took it on board and it became probably a very simplistic mission statement, and we followed her advice. Early on, we decided that we wanted no future commitments such as maintenance, allocations, financial packages, etc. So the only thought was that taking a partner was a logical step. And this we did. And this was expedited by the fact that around about this time, we found a site. Now that was remarkable in itself and was, we all recognize, the most fortunate cold call of all time. You can see from my slide that we are at the top of the hill in an AONB. To the right of us, there's a triple SI, a site of special scientific interest. And the whole of Dorset DT7 postcode is liable to subsidence. So we had our problems finding a site, but and some advice here, don't believe everything you hear and only half of what you see. Find out for yourself. We were given to understand that the land in front of you was owned by a local farmer, but we spent a few quid and did a land registry search and found while he owned most of it, he didn't own this bit. In fact, he was an absentee landlord who sold the rent, who rented the grass, I should say. So we found his telephone number and rang him up. Told him who we were and what we wanted to do. And he said the immortal words, "That sounds interesting." And we thought all our Christmases had come together. Now, when you find a site, doors open for you. We managed to get hold of a £32,000, if memory serves, from the old Home and Communities Agency, like Homes England that is, and this enabled us to pay and engage all the consultants that chase dormice and bats and things and do all the necessary work before the first turf is cut. And it also enabled us to take ownership of the project. And there then followed a quite hectic few months. We chose a housing provider to work with us. And if we had a strength, I think it was the ability to choose well, because we took a great deal of time and trouble, and we chose after presentation, question and answer, marking, and we've eventually picked on Yarlington Housing Group. And we have had very little cause to regret our original decision. Of course, we come into contact with the Wessex lot very early in the piece, and their advice was logical always and also current. And they probably steered us away from a few pitfalls and prevented our excesses, but they're worth a telephone call. After much deliberation, we appointed architects and developers and proceeded to planning. This was recommended for refusal by the officers of West Dorset District Council. So we upped traps and went up and contested, bearded them in their own den at the meeting, and got the decision overturned. We then went to reserve matters, and in fact, the developers, Fry's, got to the site in early 2017, 5 years after we started. Now, I think we've gone a bit ahead of ourselves here, because I rabbited on about our project when we'd hardly got past forming the CLT. We found early on, so if we can go back, we found early on that a CLT was not of itself a legal entity, and we needed a legal entity to run alongside it to do all the mundane tasks. Now, which one to choose? There were several private limited companies were available, as well as the Community Benefit Society, which I know that a lot of people use. We went for a company limited by guarantee, and I think merely because of the four of us, three of us were more comfortable with the 48, 67, 94 Companies Acts than we were with the regulations of the FSA. And I think that formed our preference. So we set up a company limited by guarantee. It is open to everyone as long as they are residents of Lyme Regis and are supportive of the aims and objects of the land trust itself, as noted in both our website and in our memorandum and articles of association. Oddly enough, there are no residents of Garman's Field, our 15 units that are now completed. No residents are members of the Community Land Trust. For what reason? Because they haven't asked to be. Why? I don't know. We have a company, and we have to comply with the various Companies Acts as well as with what is laid down in our memorandum and articles. We do have an annual general meeting every year. All members and directors are asked to attend, and a portion of our board resigns every year, and elections do take place. We have a monthly board meeting limited to the directors, but should anything important take place in extremis, an AGM or an SGM will be called. You may think that we did all this thing on our own. Well, we didn't. We had help, very much help, along the way. There was Wessex, who I've mentioned. They were with us throughout. And Paul Derrion from the old West Dorset District Council, he was their housing enabling officer. He came through, was very supportive throughout, and in fact gave us a 5K grant to enable us to set up. We had, of course, many setbacks. Lyme Regis is a town with very little space on which to build, and we found that that is an exception site on the outskirts of town. And perhaps if you could put up the second slide now, that was our 5 minutes of fame. The BBC turned up. The site there is completed and shows people in the background, tenants in the background, eagerly waiting to be interviewed. And it was a fine morning, and the fella couldn't wait to get off his static camera soon enough and fly his drone. But I think our 5 minutes of fame was curtailed to about a minute and a half at the end, but that doesn't matter. We did face a number of setbacks. The right to buy was a good one. It took us about a year to solve it, and we weren't helped actually by David Cameron moving the goalposts in midstream, if you will excuse the mixed metaphor. It started off, the maximum rebate was about 11,000, I think, and he put it up by about 5 times that. And we had to rethink the whole thing, but we did solve it, we think. We became a charity. We appointed the town council as our custodian trustee, and we sought to limit the length of the leases for our tenants to 5 years. I think eventually, if anybody wants to buy a house, they can't buy one there, but Yarlington might offer them one in a less salubrious situation, but I'm not sure. All this happened, as far as we were concerned. We held our first meeting in 2012, and our tenants moved in the spring of 2018. People have asked me, with hindsight, what would you have done differently? Well, I can't think that we would have done too much differently. We're a small group, less than a dozen members and directors. We have tried to be professional throughout. And this is important because I think we gained the respect of the professionals with whom we worked. We can, because we're few in number, we can take decisions quickly. There's no self-serving or hidden agendas in our ranks. And we have a simple mission statement: provide affordable rental houses for local people in perpetuity. And this we adhere to. For the future, well, we do have a project in mind, very much in embryo, as furloughing, working from home, and a lack of funding are frustrating us at the moment. I hope you enjoyed that. Oh, the third slide, yes. This is a good one. This is what it's all about. This was the picture of the kids, of the families in Garman's Field. They must have gone over about 4 parishes to get the snow because it wasn't very thick on the ground that day. But that is what it's all about. That gives us a real sense of satisfaction. One of our number has changed his the way he goes to work every day just to drive past it, to get a feeling of well-being. So go thou and do likewise.
Perfect. Oh, Keith, that was really, really wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your story. That's really cool. Well, I think without further ado, we should definitely go to some questions. Bernadette has raised her hand, so I'm going to see if I can get her in, and if I press unmute, that should hopefully work. So anyway, unmute audio. Is it working, Bernadette, when I press unmute audio? Oh, are you here?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I just wanted to say what an inspiration this gentleman is a project. The project we're doing is quite different, and it's in embryo stage, because we're looking to form a community for old people who don't want to end up in a nursing home but would like to live independently and possibly find something to build on, or like not self-build, but like houses that you can have put up. There's a lovely company up in the Hebrides called Heb Homes, and they do a fabulous variety of styles. So I'm into listening to anything to do with self-build, or if you can do it for yourself, rather than say doing a renovation, which possibly could happen. But like finding a piece of land or an old farm or something where we could make something with a centre and individual housing for people of age. I'm 72, but still fit as a fiddle, and inspired. The longevity, though, worries me slightly, the 6-year plan, but who knows? Letting me join. I'll unmute.
Cheers, Bernadette. I think I can do that. There we go. Oh, wonderful. So, yeah, well, it's really interesting. And I think the lovely thing is, like you said, I think earlier, Colin, talking about community land trusts is there are lots of different ways to have them. So obviously, yeah, Keith has shown a really viable direction that they went with theirs in, but you can also partner it with self-builds and that kind of thing. And I wonder, Colin, do you maybe just want to say a bit about maybe some of the CLTs that you've encountered that have taken things a slightly different way? Maybe some.
Well, actually, just listening to what Bernadette said there, I was thinking aloud, wondering whether when you said you want to create something for older people, whether you were looking at something more like a co-housing scheme rather than necessarily a community land trust. And you mentioned self-build as well, and I was just thinking it's a shame that maybe you did, but it's a shame you weren't able to catch our previous webinars, which we ran on co-housing and on self-build. And in fact, I'm gonna hand back to Hannah now to work out whether there's a way of providing you with some of the information that we garnered at those.
Yes, this is a good time just to let everyone know, like we will be, as soon as possible in the next week or so, I'll be uploading all of the different webinars. So we had one on self-build, one on co-housing and one on housing co-ops, all from people who've done projects before, like Keith. So they'll all be online, available to see. So yeah, hopefully that will be helpful.
But also to take that cue and to pick up on what I said earlier, you know, I described the main types of community-led housing, but they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. And so indeed, what people like Bernadette or others with a similar idea might do is, you know, create a co-housing scheme by forming a community land trust and developing the homes using self-build. It is possible to do all of those. I'd just say, as a word of caution, that obviously the more complicated you make it, the more hurdles you'll have to overcome along the way. And what a lot of community-led housing groups find is they start with an aspiration, and that partway along they have to, you know, cut their cloth to fit, if you like, make a few compromises in order to get things done. And actually, that's a question that I had for Keith. I'm not quite sure. I think you said, Keith, that there wasn't really much you'd have done differently, but were the compromises that you had to make, were the difficult decisions for the group to take along the way?
Not really. We had a simple plan and a simple creed, and we were fortunate that the finance became available, and there was a talk of subsidized market rate housing included in the plan at one stage, but that we resisted it, and it came to nothing. We managed without. But times vary and money supply varies.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of money, I'll go on to the next question, Keith. A couple of questions, I'll pass them together. Jason's asked, when did you need to work out the finances of the scheme to assess whether it could be delivered financially? And Gina's asked, how did you pay for the site and build?
Right.
Some whopping questions.
Yes, well, we when we got the houses, we knew that the total bill was going to be somewhere around 2 million. And we thought, no, nobody's going to lend £2 million to the likes of us. So, but Yarlington handled the financial package for us. They got money from Homes England, the HCA as it was then. I think the old Westdorf District Council handed over some of their T-swindle, and we managed. There was, as regards the sale, we Yarlington paid £100,000 for the land, which is about the 10th of the price that would be if it was building land and zoned for building. And they paid that, and contemporaneously, we granted them a 125-year lease over the property. And that's how it was done and worked. The town council are the freeholders. we are the beneficial owners, and the Arlington Housing Group are the landlords, tenants. That is how it worked for us. But it was money was probably more available then than it is now. I'm sure there will be a dearth of it when the pandemic is in recession. We shall follow the pandemic into recession.
Yeah, it's interesting times lie ahead for sure that are not certain.
No.
So
can I just add to that, because I think from my perspective, I mean, what happened for Keith and for the Lyme Regis Community Land Trust was working in partnership with a housing association, with an established housing association. And the history of community land trusts that worked with Wessex over the past quite a while has been largely that the partnership with a housing association has been the successful model. And it has a couple of advantages to it. And the way that I would describe that is that, I mean, Keith mentioned that the people in his group were not professionals, but you had to behave in a professional way. And quite often, people forming community land trusts or other groups, any other housing group, they may have some knowledge of some aspects of housing. They might happen to be a retired architect or someone who's a solicitor, but quite likely they won't have all of the knowledge that you'll need. And part of the purpose of having a community-led housing hub is to help you find that knowledge, to sort of point you in the direction of finding the knowledge that you need. But working with a housing association, well, they've already got the knowledge. You know, that's what they do. They build houses, they build affordable houses for people in housing need. And they've been doing that for a very long time. So often a lot of the hurdles that people come across, you know, again, Keith mentioned dormice and bats. I'm surprised you didn't mention newts and slowworms, because there's always something on a rural site. They'll have come across that before. They'll know what to do. They'll know when to bring in the person to do the dormouse survey. They'll know who is qualified to relocate slowworms. They'll know how to test it, who to bring in to test the land to see quite how liable it is to subsidence, or whatever the right phrase is. They'll know all those things because they've done it before. So the other thing is, being what officially registered providers, they're able to apply for the grant, the capital subsidy that's needed in order to make sure the houses are affordable. So Keith's already mentioned that in our case, the land came at a reduced price. I guess it was enhanced existing use price rather than residential land use price. Yes. But you know, just the construction costs, and particularly if you're building a relatively small site on the edge of a settlement, we're still going to have high pro rata construction sites, even with effectively subsidised land. You need subsidy in order to keep the homes affordable, and the housing associations can access a subsidy from Homes England. So the advantage of partnering with a housing association is the way I describe it. You get the housing association to do all the heavy lifting, but you still have the community land trust or whatever group it is in control in terms of making decisions about who the housing is for, how much housing there should be, what types of housing, how it's going to be allocated, how it's going to be managed in the future. There are key decisions which the community land trust or other groups can still hold on to. Now, it is the case that there are some community land trusts which have gone for registered provider status in their own right, and in doing that, they then don't need to partner with a housing association in order to access whatever grant might be available from Homes England or from our local housing authority. Now, in the Wessex area, those are very much in the minority, but they do exist. And I guess what I'd say to that is, yes, you're doing that, you're taking on more control, but you're also taking on more hurdles to jump through or over. Do you jump through hurdles? Over. And so, you know, it's very much a case of which route do you want to take. But it is possible to do this without involving a housing association partner. A lot of community land trusts have used the housing association partner route, and a lot of them think things go wrong from time to time, but I think most community land trusts that you talk to would be praiseworthy of their housing association partners. And I mentioned Yarlington earlier. Keith mentioned Yarlington earlier. I need to say other housing associations are also available.
It's prompt people to do some shopping around. Excellent. Great. So a question from Maureen Smith asking, so Keith, does your CLT as an entity have any income from the homes? So ground rent?
Yes, we do. We have £4 a week from each, £60 a year, about £3,000, sorry, 60,000. Let me start again. We have about £3,100 a year. There are 15 units. There is £4 a week per unit, which is £60 a week. 3,100 and something pounds a year, paid in advance, bless them. And that provides us with an income. Of course, we do have outgoings, but not many. So we are in funds at the moment, but that will go to our next project. Yes, is the short answer. Ground rent. Ours is £4 a year, and we have no thoughts of increasing it.
Okay, yeah, great, really good to know. Yeah, and the follow on from that question was, yeah, will that go to support your next project?
Yes.
So
we are statute barred from having long lunches and weekends away. Every funds, all the funds we have goes to some nebulous project in the future.
Yeah, great. Okay, so yeah, another couple of questions which I'm going to combine from Sue and Debbie. So Debbie's asking question about tenant involvement. Did you discuss with the Housing Association their own arrangements for tenant involvement? Did you think about encouraging the tenants to become CLT members so as to boost your membership and also give them a say?
Well,
I know you mentioned it briefly.
We found that membership was a strange one. We had very little interest in people becoming members. We put application forms at a prominent table at one or two of our early meetings, and they, for the most part, they demonstrated knife-like sidesteps to avoid it. And when we became close to the allocations, there was a bit of a surge in interest, but it was of the, when will they be ready? When can I have one? Sort. And we have about, as there's only 10 of us, and we could do with a few more actually, but we want members bad, but we don't want bad members, because there aren't, we'll find something for them to do. But no one, we haven't had a new application for membership for a year and more.
Yeah, membership.
It's a strange one to me. Perhaps we're doing something wrong. Perhaps we should promote ourselves more. And when we get a new project on the road, that might just take place, but we don't know.
Membership is fascinating and probably could be the subject of its own series of webinars, couldn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we're not alone, because one or two CLTs that we've talked to, their membership is pretty sparse.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
I don't understand it, but
and like you said, maybe development of future projects, it could spark a resurgence of
it could well do.
Well, we shall see. Yeah. Great. So
can I just add to that, because I think it's just it's a bit like when we talked about housing cooperatives, and one of the things that we ought to say about housing cooperatives is they're not for everyone, and that it might be that what people need is to be rehoused, and once they've been rehoused, there's plenty of other things they've got to get on with in their lives, and
That's absolutely right.
they don't need to be members of the group. I think the key thing, as Keith said, is you can make membership available to tenants, but there's no obligation on that part. And if you're part of a group listening to this, if you're part of a group that's really enthusiastic about getting housing because some of you need housing, well, maybe the cooperative model is one that you could consider. But again, it's not compulsory, and there's no sort of right or wrong answer.
Yeah, absolutely. So Esther has asked, does your scheme have a local lettings plan? So who decides which tenants move into the properties?
Ooh, that's a good one. Yes, that's a good one. Well, we steered clear of allocations at the onset, and we do have input to the allocations. Our allocations are come from the Dorset Home Choice list. Now, we managed to get an alteration to this list. It's an addition, and there is a box on every application which says, tick the box if you are a Lyme Regis resident, or you are eligible. It's known rather irreverently as Darrell's tweak, and it filters all applications unless you're it's for local people, and unless you think you have a local connection, you aren't considered. If you have a local connection, you tick the box, and then they go through the Yarlington Housing Group, vet you, financially and all sorts of things, and our only input is that they send us a name, and we have to confirm or otherwise that they are local. And that seems to have worked. It was quite remarkable. At the original allocation of these 15 units, we had 6 one-bedrooms, 5 two-bedrooms, and 4 three-bedroomed houses for whatever reason. And I was a little worried as to whether anybody would apply for them or not when they came up for bidding. And so I rang the allocations lady in Yarlington, and I got her. It sounded as she was a bit pop-eyed at the end at the other end of the line. She said, "God, we've had 258 applications." And of course, there were several. The one-bedroom flats, one-bedroom accommodation was the fly in the ointment, because there were 6 of them, and the keen ones bid for all 6. And so a lot of pruning had to be done, but eventually we got it down to 300. We were 300% oversubscribed at the end of the day.
Which is a good marker for how much we need more affordable.
Which gave us, the need was amply demonstrated.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, great. Brilliant. So, I've got an interesting question from Scott saying, are there any examples, this might be directed at you, Colin, that have explored supporting wraparound / transitional housing alongside low rental developments? I wonder, Colin, have you got an answer for that?
Warning, I think.
I must admit, I'm not quite sure what Scott means by wraparound. So I might have an answer to that, but I don't know. I wonder if we could ask Scott for some
that's a good idea.
Clarification.
So I'll go to another question and see if he comes back with a bit more of a Good idea. Great. So Jason has asked, to Wessex Community Assets and Housing Hub, do many communities in our area want to build affordable housing? And if so, how are they getting on? Got a potted history, maybe?
Well, there are loads of groups currently involved in building affordable housing as a community-led scheme. But the wider answer is that there's a whole housing sector out there building housing in our area, and I guess the amount that's community-led is still quite a small proportion of that. And just to pick on Yarlington again as just one example of a building, housing association in the process of building, they're in the process of bringing forward other sites, and there's been a greater need out there than the total construction industry can cope with for some time. And I remember, earlier Keith mentioning, we're going to be in difficult financial situation because of the pandemic and because of public funds going on to all sorts of very useful and important things right now, but what's going to do to public finances in the long run. And what we currently know is that money has been set aside for the affordable housing programme as administered through through Homes England for the next, I think it's the next 5 years. What we don't know is how much of that might be set aside for community-led housing. It might be that there's a similar proportion, and that people were able to pay for a similar amount as they have done in the past few years. It might be that there isn't, but it's still the case that if there's no funds available that's been set aside for community-led, that where the Community Land Trust is either partnering with a housing association or has become a registered provider in its own right, they can bid for funds through the normal bid round for housing that's subsidised with government money through Homes England. There will be some difficulties with that in schemes such as the one we've been hearing about at Lyme Regis, where the pro rata costs are simply going to be high. And of course, what Homes England need to do, as what the government expects Homes England to do, is to get as many houses built as possible with as least money as I can get away with giving away as possible. So it won't necessarily be easy, but there will be plenty of opportunities. And I think there'll be one of the advantages of the community being involved is not the financial side, but actually overcoming some of the planning issues. I think Keith's example has been brilliant in demonstrating that despite the planning professionals feeling the site didn't merit permission, actually the elected members in the end did give.
Great, sounds good. Thanks, Colin. Great, so I'll just tackle, I'll clarify Scott's question, and then I've got one more at the end for Keith. And while I'm doing that, what I'm going to do is post our little feedback form in the chat box. If you'd be able to take some time after the webinar to go and do that, we would be very, very super grateful. Great, so Scott's mentioned that in terms of the transitional housing, that meant, yeah, sort of looking for units for people.
I've read Scott's explanation now, and for everyone else, it's what I would call supported housing. So it just shows that we've all got different terminology. But I think what Scott is getting at is people who've got vulnerabilities, such as coming from homelessness, who are going to need more support. I suppose the phrase is wrapped around them. I get it now. So it's not just a roof over the head, but it's also a chance to reconnect with the rest of the community and other services. And I guess the answer to that is yes, that can be done through a community-led scheme. And in fact, Wessex is looking at such a scheme with another group, which is ELIM, which is a sort of church-based organisation. It's harder to see how that works in a community-led scheme, where most community-led schemes, most CLTs, most community land trusts are looking at housing for their local community and are not so geared up for providing interim support to people when they first move in. But in principle, that's no different from what we've already described. That just in Keith's case, Yarling can come along, build the houses and manage the properties, while in another case, another housing association or specialist provider could come along, build houses, provide the housing management, and provide some support services to the people who need it. The key thing, though, is whether the funds are there, because a lot of that support is not strictly part of the tenancy, and it won't necessarily be covered by people's access to whatever benefits they might have, which I don't know. It depends on where you are as to whether universal credit's been rolled out to your area yet, or whatever. But because it's not necessarily covered by that part of the welfare benefits system, it may well be that you need the local authority locally to be paying for the support the person needs. And so again, another complication, another hurdle that you may need to overcome. And the best way to overcome that is to partner with an existing group that have got being able to do that and have navigated their way through the different funding regulations in the past. So hopefully that's very briefly answered Scott's question, because I heard Keith's clock then, which I think means we've run out of time, haven't we? And I just briefly wanted to say one other thing that I picked up from earlier. Keith very helpfully was telling us about the legal format for the community land trust. Community land trusts not existing legally in their own right. Well, there is a reference in one piece of legislation that talks about community land trusts, which does give them sort of a legal definition. But you do to become a legal entity, you do need to incorporate as one of a number of different forms. And Keith was saying that Lyme Regis didn't choose to become a community benefit society, but other community land trusts do. So what I can add to that is it's roughly two-thirds of all community land trusts that we know about used to become a community benefit society. But the key thing is, whichever legal wrapper you choose, it's one where you can invoke the asset lock. And I think the issue with a company limited by guarantee is that you do actually write in the asset lock into your contribution then. But with other legal entities, the asset lock is already there by virtue of the nature of the legal entity. I suppose it's a question of exactly what you want to do. The advantage of the community benefit society over some of the other legal forms is that the community benefit society, at the moment, under current rules, finds it easier to raise community share money. And so if you were a community land trust such as Norton that I was referring to earlier, you wanted to do housing, but also you want to take over the shop or the post office or something else, you might want to raise some community share money. And indeed, that's what Norton CLT did in order to take over the shop and buy the existing stock that was in the shop at the time. So it raised money locally through community shares. And you can do that as a community benefit society in a way that there are a lot less legal hurdles to jump through than if you were a company limited by guarantee trying to raise such money. So I think that's I'll have to stop there because we definitely run out of time. But the key thing is about 2/3 of community land trusts choose community benefit society. That doesn't mean to say the other third are wrong.
That was a really good clarification, Colin. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So brilliant. Yes, we've come to the end. I just wanted to ask you very briefly, Keith, have you enjoyed volunteering and being part of a community land trust?
Yes, I have. It's been a lot of fun.
That was the right answer. Excellent. Well, without further ado, I want to say thank you so much, Keith, for joining us and sharing your experience. Really insightful. Really insightful and really clearly laid out, so a lot of people can go away and muse on if they want to do something similar in the future. Thank you as well, Colin, as ever. And thank you for answering all of our questions. Thank you everyone for participating and asking lots of really interesting questions, getting us thinking. And this is the last of these webinars, but we have plans to hopefully do some more in the future. And I'll be sending a follow-up email with some extra resources in, and also we've got a newsletter coming out soon with updates on what the Housing Hub is up to. So in the meantime,
hang on one more thing, and we also ought to mention that if anyone's interested in what the BBC did after flying their drone, there are a couple of clips from the BBC of videos of Keith and Diomedes CLT on the Wessex Community Assets website.
Yeah, absolutely. Go straight there now and have a watch. Brilliant. All right then. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a lovely afternoon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.